Hello and welcome to the first episode of this series where we are going to talk about testing Blazor applications with bUnit. So bUnit is a testing library for testing Blazor applications. So suppose you've developed a Blazor application with different components and now you want to verify whether those components are working correctly or not. So using bUnit you can inspect the HTML produced by those components. You can inspect the input parameters, the interactions between components. You can, for example, simulate a click event on a button and do all sorts of things. We are going to explore bUnit in this series in the domain of a real project. For this series, I am assuming you know a little about Blazor and Blazor development. If that's not the case, there are other playlists on the channel that you can use. And if you are also familiar with other front-end frameworks or libraries like React or Angular, that would also be very helpful. I have already created other playlists on the channel about React, Angular, about testing in Angular and React that you can use as well. But again, if you know a thing or two about Blazor, that would be great. If you have some experience with testing, unit testing, integration testing with, for example, XUnit, that would also be very helpful. But I am going to take things, one step at a time, so that if you are not that familiar with Blazor or testing, either you'll be fine. I think you will also be able to watch the series and learn the concepts that I am going to cover. As always, we are going to create branches for each episode. You can find the whole sample file, the whole solution file, using the link I have provided in the description of this video. You can clone the repository from my GitHub and then explore the different branches. Right now I've got this branch, as you can see here. So we are on branch number 1, and we're gonna create other branches for other videos as well. And as you can see here, I have created a simple Blazor application with different projects. So this project template by default creates a client, server, and shared project. So the client, of course, is the Blazor application. The server is the backend API, and I have also, created another test project. So this is the client application. Again, as I told you guys, I am assuming you're familiar with Blazor, so I'm not gonna, explore every single piece of code. We are going to focus mostly on testing. If you want to understand how Blazor works, I'd highly recommend checking out the other playlists on the channel. And I've got the server application, of course, which is the backend API, which we will probably use, and a shared project is also created, which by default contains this code file, weather forecast. And I have created this project as well. So this is the test project that we're going to use to create our tests and to kind of test the different parts of the application. So the first thing that you need to do is that you need to create, as you can see, a project reference to the client application, because the client application is going to host our components. So those are the things we want to test, right? And of course we need to install a couple of packages as well. I have already done so. So I have installed XUnit, I have installed bUnit. bUnit, as the name suggests, is the testing framework, testing library for Blazor applications. I've got the XUnit runner extension for Visual Studio and so on. So you can already see the extensions that I have, the extensions that I have installed. And I've got this component file, which is empty right now. We are going to write the code for this file. It is called patient status.razor. It is empty for now, and we are going to put the test code in this code file, which is called patient status test. So my plan is to explore the different features of bUnit by creating different components, different pages, and then writing tests for them. We are going to start very small. We are going to create very simple components, write very simple tests, and explore them. Again, I am assuming you're already familiar with Blazor, right? So if, for example, I create a component that I want to test, I will probably not focus a lot on it because the code is going to be easy to understand for people who have already worked with Blazor. We are going to focus mostly on the tests that we are going to create. So again, if you want to know more about Blazor, there are other playlists on the channel that you can watch. So the first thing that I want to do here is to create a simple component that we can test. So this is the the domain of the application is, by the way, the same application that I have used in the Blazor Fundamentals playlist. So I've got this playlist on the channel called Blazor Fundamentals, which deals with creating a Blazor application with a real domain like a clinic management system. So we are going to take that domain and create our components, our pages, and test them one step at a time. And the components and the pages that I'm going to create, will allow us to explore the different features of bUnit one step at a time. So let me go ahead and create one very simple component and then write some tests for that component. So our component is going to have a code block with two parameters, name and is admitted of type string. This is the code block. Now we need to create the template as well. So the template again is going to be very easy. We are using Razor to print out the values of these two properties. So name and is admitted. So in this case, we are doing some conditional rendering for this paragraph tag. If is admitted is true, we're going to render admitted inside of the paragraph. Otherwise, we're going to print discharged. So this is it. This is the first component, very simple component, and now we want to be able to test it. And again, as I told you, I have already created a test project. I have installed the packages that I want. You can go ahead and install these. So bUnit, xUnit, as well as the project reference to the Blazor client application, and this is the code file. And what I have done is that I have created the same components folder here. So this is again like a preferred convention that I'm following. I've got my components folder here with the Razor file, the components, and I've got the same components folder here with the same name of the component. So patient status tests, right? And I am going to start creating some tests. So this is the first test that I want to write. Let me go ahead and create the class first. This class needs to inherit from TestContext. We are going to talk about TestContext shortly, and then I want to start writing the test. So I'm going to decorate the test with fact attribute coming from xUnit, the name of the test, and the different phases of the test: arrange, act, and assert. Again, I hope you're already familiar with the concepts of testing. If not, there are other playlists on the channel that you can watch if you want to get yourself familiar with testing. So we're done. We're done with the first test. By reading the test, I guess you'd understand what the test is doing. It is not that complicated. So basically, we have combined the arrange phase and the act phase. We are, creating the component itself. So we are using this render component, function, and we are passing the type of the component we want to render, patient status, and we have a reference to this, component because we have a reference to the project that holds that component. and then the component receives two input parameters. So using this render component, we can pass those two input parameters. So this is what we are doing here, right? So we're passing parameters as our parameter of the lambda expression, and then we're using parameters.add to add the parameters. So the name of the parameter and the value. So one of the parameters was name, the other one was is admitted. This one is of type boolean, this one is of type string. We are putting those values there, right? So now inside of this component variable, we have like a rendered version of the patient status component using these two values for the input parameters. Now we can assert the HTML produced by this component. So let's take a look here. If, for example, we put, I don't know, like John Doe for the name here, we expect the text inside of the paragraph to be John Doe. And if we pass true to is admitted, we expect the text inside of the P paragraph to be a status and then admitted, right? So this is what we expect the component to render, and this is what, therefore, we expect this component variable to hold. Now, in order to test the produced HTML, the HTML that the component has produced based on the parameters that you have passed to the component, you can assert that. So using this component variable, you can use this method, markup matches, and then you can go ahead and put the HTML that you expect the component to render. So we expect to have this div tag, two p tags, and then another closing div tag. Of course, we can take these out of this code file because I know that we do not want to pollute our test code file with a lot of HTML. And again, this is not a very flexible approach, because if the let's say the HTML produced by the component changes, this code will break. So the code is not very flexible. It's not very robust. It's brittle a little bit. But we're gonna refine those. We're gonna refactor these different issues as we progress throughout the course. So a very simple component, a very simple test. And again, as I told you, I'm going to talk a little bit about TestContext. So TestContext, this is coming from bUnit. So this is a base class to create a TestContext for you. So right now, patient status test is a TestContext. And this TestContext, this base class, provides you with some types, for example, or some functions. For example, this render component is one of the types that we are using in order to get the let's say the produced HTML of this component. So by inheriting your test code file from TestContext base class coming from bUnit, you will have access to different types, different functions that we will of course explore as we progress throughout the course. These are coming from this TestContext based file, like for example, as I told you, render component. And that allows you to create, as they say, a test context. So right now, patient status test is a test context because it is inheriting from this base class. Now, of course, we can go ahead and run this test to see whether it passes or not, whether the component produces the same HTML code or not. So it's going to build the project now. So the project was built and the test passed, but I can go ahead and go to the text explorer, and I think I would probably be able to show like an indication here as well, but I don't know why it doesn't show up now. But if I run it one more time, more often than not, it shows like an indication here. But here it says, one test passed. So if I go to Test Explorer, I can see that the patient status test has one test called renders correct status for admitted patient, and it is passing. This means that the component is rendering the correct HTML. So the HTML that we expect to receive. Now let's go ahead and create another test as well. So this test is going to use the same component, patient status. We are going to pass the name and the value for is admitted. In this case is going to be false. And this is the assertion that we are going to make. Now, I wanted to show you another technique for doing your assertion. Again, if you take a look at this test, it is very similar to what we did in the previous one. So we have used the render component type. We are specifying the type of the component we want to test. We are passing the two, parameters, right? But in this case, we are using a different technique. So we are combining like CSS selectors with some, properties. For example, take a look here. This is the component variable here, right? I am using the find function on it. So again, remember this component variable is of type render component coming from the TestContext, which we are inheriting from. So that gives us access to this find, function. And using this find, you can use, as you can see here, a CSS selector. You do not need to be an expert when it comes to using CSS selectors, but I mean, the CSS selector speaks for itself. It says the last, P paragraph tag, the last P tag, the last paragraph tag inside of that, component needs to have this text, this piece of text, a status discharged inside of its text content. So in this case, I am not concerned with the whole HTML code produced by the component. I just want to verify the text content of one single HTML element, and that is the last paragraph tag inside of the HTML that this component has produced. And I expect the text content of that one last paragraph to be a status discharge. And that is correct, right? Because we are putting false, we are setting false to this, is admitted property. So if I go to the component, you can see that if is admitted is false, what we are going to get is a status colon and then discharged. So that test is, not kind of testing the whole HTML, but only testing the last, P tag here. So again, I can go ahead and run this test. Yeah, I got the indication here, so let me run it. So again, this test passed as well. We are getting the, correct text content. If, for example, I change this discharge to, let's say, admitted, to test whether I am getting the, the test is passing for a good reason or not, you can see that the test fails. So this is working, right? Discharged. And let me run it one more time. So we saw two different techniques for testing the HTML that the component, creates. And that's it for this episode. If you enjoyed watching it, I'd really appreciate it if you could, give it a thumbs up or share it with a friend. And if you want to know more about, bUnit and the different options that you have when testing Blazor applications, stay tuned because in future episodes, we're going to, explore many different features of bUnit, using different components and pages. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Stay tuned. See you in the next one.